My name's Adele Onyango, and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Hey you, welcome to part 2 of the best version of you right here on Legally Clueless. Thank you so much for being part of this family. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, audio episodes like this got every single Monday everywhere you find podcasts on, we're there. And if you head over to our website, you can watch 4 seasons of our video series, watch our tour series. Our website is legallycluelessafrica.com, and our favorite corner of social media is Legally Clueless Africa on Instagram. I don't know, I find like other platforms to be quite rough sometimes. I used to really enjoy TikTok. I still do a bit, but there's like a lot of bullying that happens there as well. It's just so strange. So make sure you check out our Instagram page, like or follow. All the links I've talked about are in the show notes. If you are an OG member, thank you so much for crossing over into another year with us. This year we turn 5 in March. Oh my goodness. I have been planning for our 50th celebrations since early last year. But anyway, that's not what this episode is about. We really have to get right into it because it's going to be pretty long. In case you haven't listened to part 1 of the best version of you, you may want to listen to the previous episode where we looked at how do you start to set goals, beginning of the year, best time to do that. And how can you build healthier financial habits? In fact, on financial habits, I actually started this past week my 52-week challenge again. I haven't even spent what I raised or saved rather last year with that challenge. It's meant to go towards a piece of land that I thought I'd be able to get in December, but I have been advised to take my time. So I'm looking in like 2 new places just to get the best deal and the best place. Yeah, so I figured just continue saving. I mean, why not? Even if you've hit your target for what you needed to spend, like just keep going. So I have started my 52-week challenge. If you have never heard of the 52-week challenge, I talked about it in the previous episode, but if you, how can I get you this work plan, the worksheet? Because I have a worksheet that I actually tick off, and it's actually my very close person, let's call him that, who put it together for me. So maybe I can ask him to send it and put it on a Google Drive for you. I'll ask the team to like help me figure that out. But if you're interested in getting the worksheet, maybe in the meantime, you can just DM us on Instagram in case you want to join the 52-week challenge. It would be very dope to do it together, actually. So yes, I've gone on a tangent. This episode is about 2 things: tips on how to start your healing journey and tips around building boundaries with your family, especially. So we're going to start with the former. Tips on starting your healing journey. This could be the year that you get closer to your highest self. I have been intentionally healing for a while, and there's some tips that I wanted to share with you that might help you. And if you have any more tips once you listen to this episode, you can drop them our way on Instagram and I'll share them in the next episode. So the first one is, I feel like the very beginning, what helped me is radical acceptance and acknowledgement of who I was and what wasn't running efficiently within me and without, so around me. I don't know if you've ever heard the quote, what we resist persists, what we accept can change. And I feel like it really sums up that first step for me of like acceptance. Okay, this is where I am. This is what needs to change. This is a weird habit I have and I don't know where it's coming from and I wanted to change. You know what I mean? Almost like doing an internal audit. Many times we lie to ourselves about who we are. It's how we cushion ourselves. But that's just self-sabotage, if you ask me. It's keeping you away from your highest self. So acceptance means letting go of all the lies you've been telling yourself about yourself. And what I also have to stress in this space of acceptance and acknowledgement, there is no space for shame in this step. I know many of us stay away from this because we feel ashamed of maybe mistakes that we keep making or traumas we haven't confronted, etc. There's shame that we feel. But I just want to encourage you that the step of accepting where you really are and what you need to work on, there's no shame in this step, because this is the most powerful, loving thing you can do for yourself. It's okay if you feel something is off. It's okay if you're not sure what exactly that thing is. That's fine. Very common. Just an acknowledgement of something is off is good enough as well. My second tip is commitment. You need to commit to what needs to change, or like the healing tools that you choose to use. So if you accept you have bad habits that need changing, you commit to changing them. If you want to start your healing journey by committing to maybe talk therapy, then actually bind yourself to this commitment. Acknowledge it might get hard or uncomfortable on this journey, but commit that you will not quit. I remember when I got my second therapist, that was at the beginning of like my divorce journey. And at that point, I felt so alone, so misunderstood, broken, tired. Like I felt like my soul was tired. I wanted to give up on life, on living. I think I spoke about that on the podcast back then. Yeah, I just didn't share the context because I was like in the eye of the storm. Yeah, I just felt really broken, and I knew I needed a second therapist. My first therapist doesn't live in Kenya, so it's virtual sessions, and the core of that space is mainly around sexual trauma. So I knew I needed someone else because the divorce was bringing up a lot of losses, a lot of things that I hadn't dealt with before. And I've never been through a divorce before. So I was just like, I don't know what else is going to come down this road. Everybody around you normally like tells you it's like war, etc. I still believe it doesn't have to be. But yeah, I just felt like I needed another therapist who was physically close to me. Just because I was just like, I don't know what this journey is going to look like. You know, going through that while still having to show up for work and show up for myself in terms of like cultivating healthy habits around like eating, sleeping, etc. was a lot. And I remember at the beginning of me saying, okay, I'm going to commit to this, I wrote myself a commitment letter. But I journal a lot, and you know I love words. And so I wrote myself a letter to myself just saying, I'm committing to every Thursday I'm going to go and see Faith. Like, I'm not going to flake out. I'm going to do this for me. No matter how uncomfortable it gets, no matter if it's a day I don't even want to roll out of bed, the one thing I'm going to stick to is going for those therapy sessions. And I remember telling someone super close to me about it, and he would call every Thursday. Like, he knew that the times, let's say, my therapy sessions would be done, just to low-key, I know, check if I did make it. So almost like holding me accountable, but also just kind of like to congratulate me, like, wow, you're doing this, keep going. So yeah, you have to really, really commit. I don't know if you're into journaling and you like words. Even if you don't, I feel like writing something and putting it somewhere you see it often is like a reminder of, yeah, we got this. We're going to keep doing this. Another tip when you are starting your healing journey is to really work on changing how you speak to and about yourself. As much as you can get help from the outside in, you are the person who is steering this ship. You spend the most time with you, so you can actually make or break your healing journey. Like, you can have all the therapists in the world, you can have accountability partners, you can have the most loving partners, the most loving friends, but you are the make or break piece, you know? And I think how you speak to yourself needs to be loving, even when you're holding yourself accountable, which when you're doing your healing journey, many times you will have to confront things that maybe you could have done differently, mistakes that you've made. You may slip up here and there. So you will have moments where you need to hold yourself accountable. And in those moments, you can still speak lovingly to yourself. I think there is a quote that I love that says, you can't shame yourself into change. You can only love yourself into evolution. And I really do believe that. So when you think something about yourself, or your inner voice says something to you about you that's nasty, and you know that bitch can get super nasty, maybe what you can do, which is a tip, is say it out loud. Like, speak it out loud. And then ask yourself, would you ever say that to someone else? Chances are, nah. And even if you did, you wouldn't get too far. Someone can land a hot slap your way. So you start to realize, okay, so why am I talking to myself like this? Like, what the heck? That's wrong. I learned this from my friend Valentine so many years ago, and I kept it with me. Speak to yourself as you would your lover. And that has evolved to me actually calling myself love. Yeah, when I'm speaking to myself, even if I'm holding myself accountable for something, if I made a mistake, no matter how stupid, maybe it's a mistake while I'm baking or something, I call myself love. And I cheer myself on even when I've done something wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm cheering myself on like, yay, keep fucking up. No, I cheer myself to make myself understand that I want to do better because I am capable and deserving of it. So it's like, yeah, we messed up here and there, but you know what? Do you know you can do better? Do you know you're capable of that? Do you know you're deserving of that? And it helps me get to the stage of evolution and doing better so much faster than if I was like, you're just shit at this and you suck at that. Like that just paralyzes you and you don't even evolve into anything better. So don't make jokes about yourself or speak negatively about yourself. You are so powerful, so capable of evolution if you surround yourself with love. And you will really need to believe in yourself on a whole new level while healing. So get that inner voice to start talking to you with tons of love. The other tip is to reevaluate all relationships, like the people who surround you now. Be brutally honest, like, are you as close as you think you are? Are you intentional in that relationship? Do you feel safe in that relationship? Are your values aligned? Really evaluate all the relationships around you, from relationships with family. We're going to get to that a little later in this episode. Friends, colleagues, team members, if you run a business, partners, if you're in an intimate relationship, really do that. Honestly, like, I'm very happy the beginning of my solo sessions with my second therapist. First and foremost caveat, if you hear knocking in the background, there is a bird at my office window and my window is reflective. So anytime they hear me speaking or moving around in the office, they come and fight their reflection because they think it's their reflection. It's cute and they're the cutest birds, but not so good for sound. I'm hoping this mic doesn't pick it, but hey, if you do hear it, it's a cute bird with like a yellow breast, which I think is pretty cool. Like it's yellow, black, and white, and those are the Legally Clueless colors. So maybe it's like our... Anyway, reevaluate all those relationships. I'm happy that's where my solo sessions with my second therapist started, because I started to understand who is my safe space, and really just found out, even through the divorce times, I had like maybe 2 spaces that were my safe space outside of like my lawyers and my therapists. Those spaces could hold me accountable. They could love on me. We could sit in silence on the days that there are just no words. And so you really do need, on your healing journey, people who are going to be safe spaces for you, whatever that means for you, because we all define this differently. And you'll find that when you reevaluate the relationships around you, it doesn't mean that the people you have a relationship with now are terrible, but not all of them are going to be able to be safe spaces for you. And that's just the truth. And so, yeah, you will need people. Trust me. It does get hectic, whatever it is that you're healing. I think it's also a great tip to work backwards by asking yourself questions like, what do you love? What inspires you? What do you feel passionate about? Start understanding where it is you're working towards, like have the end in sight. Even though I truly believe like healing is not a destination, even when you do get to the point where you feel so much more you than you've ever felt, there will still be things that you still need to be healing from, because first, life is not static and neither is this healing journey. It's not linear, but it really helps to think about, what does your highest self look like, and what does she or he or they love, and start to kind of find that person again. I love that I did that at a point in my therapy sessions, and I really came home to myself, and it translated across my career, my business, my relationships, my love life, my friendships. Like, it just, everything blossomed after that. Yeah, start asking yourself those questions, because we're trying to bring you back to yourself. Those are 5 tips I think you should think about when you're starting your healing journey, in case this is the year you say, I'm going to be courageous enough to do this. I'm going to be courageous enough to move closer to my highest self. And for what it's worth, we may not know each other personally, but I truly believe in you. I think when I was going through this second chapter of my healing, it was quite powerful to have people around me who believed in me, and people who would say they believed in me. Because there are points in the healing journey that you really stop believing in yourself. And so it helps to tap into other people's energies. Let me wrap up the healing journey tips by saying, when I look back and think about the things that I'm grateful for on this journey, I'm still healing. I still have so much to work on. I'm grateful for kindness. Oh my goodness, so much kindness around me. I'm grateful for love. I'm grateful for intentional relationships where I feel loved and seen. I'm grateful to myself for being courageous enough, for really putting in that work. Healing is work. Intentional healing is work. So as much as it's hectic, it births so much freedom and so much light. And even if you're just thinking about starting it, or starting the journey, that already shows me that you're pretty courageous. So you got this. So let's talk about boundaries with family and the tips I have around that. First and foremost, I have an entire boundaries episode. I should probably look at what exact episode it is. Give me a second. The boundaries episode. The boundaries episode is episode 179. So yeah. Is it? Yes, it is. Make sure you go and check it out. Hang on. I didn't know we were on Boomplay. The fuck? I am gonna have to... When did this shit happen? I say this because I was in conversation with Boomplay a long time ago, and their onboarding process was so difficult because it was more skewed towards being a music platform than a podcast platform. So I kind of gave up on them. But what the fuck? Oh no, but they're so... I need to talk to them about this, because how? Anyway, that's not the point of this episode. Boundaries. Yeah, check out the full boundaries episode. I talk about the types of boundaries, the different types, and my experience enforcing different boundaries in my life. But I want to share some tips, especially when we talk about like African families, because boundaries is such a taboo topic with African families, even though in any setting, a boundaryless relationship often ends with someone feeling or being exploited or feeling exhausted. You know what I mean? Relationships with family isn't exempt from this. I always say it's important to acknowledge that family is made up just by regular humans. Some are great, some are broken and healing, some are traumatized and projecting this on others, some have shared values with you, some you can never be friends with, some you can't even be in the same room with. It's normal, the same way in any other setting, be it in school or at work, or you have people who you get along with, people who you don't, because they're just regular humans. It's the same thing with family, and sometimes it's really counterproductive to put family on a pedestal and think they're not human and have such high expectations of them. I think it's important to first view family as just made up of regular humans, And in that same breath, you have to be intentional in getting to know your family. Just because you grew up in the same house and experienced the same traumas doesn't mean you're the same, or that you believe in the same things, or you react in the same way, or were affected in the same way by things you experienced in that home or in that family, be it nuclear or extended. I mean, even when you look at siblings, right? You experience different versions of your parents. So even your experiences that aren't traumatic with your parents are not the same. I am a last born. I feel like by the time I came, there was, my parents were probably very different in terms of the parenting journey. And even when I think about my dad, like my dad had 2 wives and we were from the second wife. He had done this rodeo of having kids. I mean, he had his issues, but he had done it so many times before. So by the time me, the last one, comes, he's probably going to be a lot more lenient with me. And so I will experience a very different version of him than, say, his first ever child. And if you look at the African context, a lot is gendered. So even how, let's say, kids who identify as female are treated versus those who identify as male is very different as well. So what I'm trying to drive home is, even with siblings, you experience different versions of your parents. Even if it's experiences that are not traumatic, you just experience different versions of your parents, and it is what it is, So it's silly to assume that your values are aligned automatically or that you really know each other, unless you intentionally set time aside to get to know each other, just as you would with any other human. Families are made up of regular human beings. When I was going through my divorce, I did feel misunderstood by some of my family members. And in that moment, I immediately felt wronged because, you're in the eye of the storm, so many emotions. So it's very easy to feel like, what the fuck, I wonder, surely, why don't they know me, etc. You kind of go into that cocoon. But with time and with a lot of work that I've done on myself and understanding different contexts, the wonderful thing about working on yourself is you find that you understand others a lot easier as well. But I realized I hadn't intentionally gotten to know my family or showed them who I am. So how can you expect to be understood when you didn't, on both sides, make an effort to intentionally know each other? And spending time with people isn't intentionally getting to know each other. I mean, even if you borrow from the context of an intimate relationship, the two of you can spend a lot of time together and still not know each other because you're not having conversations that matter or really having experiences that bind you or having conversations where each other's worldview is brought to light. Even with family, you might spend a lot of time together, maybe because you live together or you have a lot of family engagements, etc. So you're spending time together, but you still don't know each other. You're not being intentional about that. I realized I was enmeshed in relationships, some with family where our worldviews were completely different. So this demanded a betrayal of self. This happens, for me, because I think I really used to think I was super broken. I wasn't enough as I was. I thought I was discounted. My therapist calls it I used to arrive into any relationships, friendships or what, with a gift to compliment or to say hey, I know I'm not good enough, but I've brought this gift. And the gift can be something I offered to the relationship. Either I'm the one who's going to be paying for this, or those are just examples. So I had this really damaged view of myself, which was on my end, not manufactured, or nobody on the outside was responsible for that. That was my own traumatic events that I had to figure out. But because of that, I felt like I needed to do everything to fit into different relationships and friendships, and sometimes even relationships with family. When you do it from that foundation, what happens, or what this demands, is a betrayal of self. You end up betraying yourself. And I remember in therapy, I went through each family member and unpacked my relationship with them. And it's such a scary journey, because you wonder, does doing this mean I don't love them? Those were my thoughts at the beginning of doing this, because I was like, oh my goodness, first and foremost, I'm an orphan. I'm not trying to lose any relationships with my family, because I don't even have parents, yo. And so it was really scary at the beginning. But I realized that it doesn't mean that you don't love them. Not at all. In fact, evaluating the relationships is an act of love. because it means you care enough about the relationship to go back and check if you're arriving at it or in it in a healthy manner or not. Because you want it to thrive, or you want it to be the best it can be, and you want it to be real. And so I did that. And I remember even realizing why a certain aunt and I are pretty close. It's because our worldviews are very similar. I mean, I even remember us at some point last year. She's going to be so ashamed that I'm talking about this, but whatever. We had a conversation about where she should get a sex toy from. And she's 50. And I truly believe in sex toys. Like, I think everybody needs to try them out. It's a brilliant way to kind of like know your body and to know what you like, what you dislike. It's, I think there's nothing taboo about it, as much as it's pretty legal in this country called Kenya. And so I remember us having a conversation about that. She is the only family member who, I think I called her the first time I ever tried shrooms. I think I met up with her the week after, and I was just like, hey, get this. Our worldviews are so similar. Oh my goodness. And so I kind of like understood when I was reevaluating all the relationships with families. Like, I get why we're close. Like, we have a similar view of life. And some things we differ greatly. Like, there are many times we've differed on certain things. But even in those moments, I feel like the space is safe enough for me to say, hey, I don't like this, or I don't like where this conversation is going. And she can also do the same for me, It doesn't mean that you look down on or don't love those in your family with a different worldview from you. Oh no, quite the opposite happens. You get so comfortable in who you are when you're actively healing and getting to know yourself that you aren't insecure about it. You actually give people the space to have a different worldview, and you're not trying to force people to see the world the way you do, which is what happens in very many families, is trying to force every family member to have the same worldview. It's impossible. And so when you do the work on yourself, you let others have a worldview without you holding a grudge just because their worldview is different from yours, or you would have acted differently. Once you know yourself, the kind of relationships or people you want closer to you start changing. And so what also changes is the level of access everybody has to you, boundaries. So some tips in setting those up in the context of family is, I think at the beginning, is to prioritize your needs and to understand this is not selfish at all. You're deserving of your own energy too. And there's no pride in abandoning of self or of your needs. Like, there's no trophy for that. That's whack. Don't do it. Sometimes we feel that we need to do everything to be accepted by family, even at the expense of our needs. So I think step number one is, please ask yourself this: which of your needs are you currently abandoning to gain acceptance from your family? Do you have an answer to that? It's a good place to start. Also, learn how to say no. It could be a family function you don't have energy for, or you just don't want to go to. That's valid. Newsflash. It's absolutely valid. At the beginning of setting boundaries, especially for this, you may be tempted to lie and say, I'm at work, etc. Wouldn't it be so awesome to get to the point where you don't have to qualify your no? You know what I mean? And you can communicate your no in a very respectable way. No isn't disrespectful. So if there's a function, for example, and you just don't have the bandwidth to show up, you can just say, no, I will not be able to attend it. And that should be enough. And you don't have to engage. Maybe your family has a particular member. There's always a pretty overdramatic family member, you know what I mean, who might be like, why? You don't come for these things. And you don't have to honor every invite to uncomfortable conversations or fights. You can leave your statement as is. It's valid. Like, you don't have to qualify your no. You know why you said no, and that's pretty good enough. I remember my mom used to say this to me a lot. She said, when you ask someone something, there's three answers you can get: yes, no, or maybe. And that's just what it is. So don't ever feel like you have to abandon self and overexert yourself for family in the moments where you just don't have the bandwidth. You're human. Learn how to say no. Another tip is that you can still fulfill family obligations while prioritizing your needs. African families are pretty toxic in how they praise the most selfless members when in fact they are sucking that selfless person dry, which is very unfair. If you do not allow yourself to be drained, you can often find yourself being labeled selfish or the black sheep, etc. It's fine, but the labels will never kill you. So be comfortable being misunderstood as long as you are taking care of you and not abandoning yourself. That's okay. Whatever label comes with this new you with boundaries, it's fine because you know this isn't true. And you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. You can still help out in emergencies or functions while prioritizing your needs. So always check in with yourself and ask, what do I have the capacity for right now? Even in an emergency or whatever function or thing there is in the family that's happening. Ask yourself that question first. And then the second question is to ask, how can I contribute to this specific event? Let's say it's an emergency, God forbid, a funeral, and you need to support it in one way or another. Ask yourself, how can I still do this while prioritizing your needs? I remember when my Uncle Peter died last year. I did an episode about him, the Uncle Peter episode. Please listen to it. It's how I honored him. I didn't have the bandwidth at that time to write, what is it called? It's not a memorial. It's like you write a little blurb that goes into the program. I didn't. And I remember having a back and forth with one of my aunts and just saying, hey, this is not me being disrespectful. I love words. I think everybody knows this. And I'm still processing. I don't have the words to talk about the death of my uncle yet. And I don't want to share words that I don't believe in or that are not my truth because I don't know that truth or what I'm feeling right now. And even just still being able to contribute and to do my bit in helping with the funeral while prioritizing my needs. I think that for me was a moment where I felt like, oh, hang on. We always think having boundaries and not being overexerting yourself for family means that you don't love family and that you can't help. You can help while still having your boundaries intact. Another tip is still on functions and things. I think what also helps is communicating your boundaries in advance. So like if there's a function and you need to leave early. So for example, I realize now I'm an introvert. And so even social functions of any kind, I have a very, not limited, I don't think it's limited, I do try, but I have a bandwidth. And so, I mean, I'm giving you this tip, but I don't even do it myself. I need to get better at it. But it helps to communicate, maybe if you're going for a family function and say like, oh, I'll have to leave early, so that you don't have to have an awkward conversation in the middle of the function. And it helps you manage your family's expectations. Let's say you were having a holiday gathering, etc., maybe for Christmas, etc. And maybe you were all going to shags and people were staying for a week, but you only wanted to stay for a day. Communicating it in advance helps manage your family's expectations. So then people are not reacting in the moment to them. Let's talk about financial boundaries. That's also in the boundary episodes. It is a thing. Money, black tax is a fucking thing, especially in African families. I'm very thankful I haven't experienced this per se. I do have a family member who really loves money. They're constantly asking for money. And I remember saying to them, this isn't comfortable for me because I was feeling so used. And I remember communicating to them that I will not be picking their calls anymore because I felt like they weren't checking up on me and like I wasn't cared for. There were no questions of, did you even eat last night? And to protect myself, I put up that boundary and I communicated it verbally. I think what helps is having a percentage that you commit to yourself, that with family things, I will not move past this particular amount. So have financial boundaries. Listen to that. I spoke about it in the boundaries episode, because maybe you do have black tax. Maybe you have parents who are alive and you need to contribute to health stuff or like the running of the home to some extent. Have a percentage that you commit to yourself that with family things, I will not move past this particular amount. Commit to it. As I spoke about earlier, just commit that you're going to do this, because you also have financial goals. Don't forget about that. It doesn't mean you're being selfish. You just have boundaries as well. Another thing that I think is important is to avoid family gossip. I actually try and avoid gossip all around. I fail sometimes. It's something I'm intentionally doing. In fact, like recently, my best friend was telling me about like a big trending gossip story in Kenya. She'd been telling me about it like in one sentences for a couple of weeks, but I wasn't really understanding. I was just like, oh, okay, and just like kind of leaving it. And then when it blew up further and we were talking, she was like, dude, I've been telling you about this. Connie, what Instagram are you on? And I was like, my Instagram is full of vintage photos of different African countries and African women and memes and photographers and poets. And like, I love my Instagram so much, because it really feeds me. It really feeds me. And then now I've found new pages that talk about grief. And so that's also some of the things I follow. I don't follow gossip sites. I never even know when I'm featuring on them. I have, not as much as like most people, but I have. I kind of just realized that they don't see people as humans, and in turn, they teach you to do the same. And it's the same with family gossip. If something has happened that requires someone to be helped, I'd rather speak to the person directly. Also, the same way I want my boundaries respected, I will respect other people's boundaries. If you don't tell me directly, I'm not talking about it. I'm not bringing it up with you. This wasn't who I was before. I really used to be involved in a lot of family gossip, like talking about it or wanting to know certain things. But when you talk about boundaries, you have to respect other people's boundaries as well, the same way you want yours respected. And many times when you set healthy boundaries, it starts with removing yourself from toxic situations. And family gossip is as toxic as it gets. And it's easier to kind of like avoid family conflicts. Honestly, like as soon as I stop really getting involved in family gossip or drama, I've had less conflicts because I just don't know what's happening. It doesn't help. Even when I think back to like the quality and the intentionality of having strong relationships with family members, when you're getting to know each other, it's important to get to know each other and not spend all your time gossiping, because then you realize that you may talk every day, but you don't know each other because you're constantly talking about other people. Now, in setting boundaries, there's this thing that I'm a bit conflicted on, where it's like how you communicate your boundaries. I'll tell you why, and I think I spoke about it in the boundary episode. The first set of boundaries I had to put together were relationships where through therapy we'd identified I'd been enmeshed in. And I was enmeshed because I was so broken and like I just didn't know myself. So I was kind of leeching onto other people for identity and validation and all of those things, which are super unhealthy things to do. And it wasn't the other people's, like they were not even involved in that enmeshment situation. It's like I decided all that madness myself. And I remember my therapist telling me, oh no, I don't think you need to verbally communicate the boundaries you're setting up for that particular context. I think what you need to do is just kind of change your behavior and your habits. And I was like, oh, this new therapist, she did not know my people. I'm a communicate, etc. But the thing is, sometimes it can sound very painful. Like, it's not your intention to be hurtful, but intent and impact sometimes are not the same. And so sometimes it's difficult to have those conversations, to communicate your boundaries verbally. And so you have to kind of read the situation to see, is this relationship going to work with the boundaries being communicated verbally, or do I just kind of reinforce them through behavior over and over, behavior and actions? Because sometimes you could have a family member who's unaware of how their actions are hurting you, and you can have a conversation and sort of things change. And sometimes it may not change because maybe the conflict is you have two different worldviews. So like, why would anybody change who they are and what they believe in for you? That's also not fair. So you need to check in with yourself and be very realistic, you know? Will they be open enough? Let's say you've had a conflict with someone in your family. Will they be open enough to hearing your perspective? Will the conversation be progressive? Will it change anything? Because sometimes you can engage in a conversation that can end up being counterproductive. So check in and really judge each relationship with each family member whom you're setting up boundaries with differently. Some relationships may be okay with these boundaries communicated verbally, some may not. I think the last tip is to remember that you are not in control of people's reactions to your boundaries. When you are a bit of a hippie like me, in fact, my best friend is constantly telling me, Adele, not everybody sees things the way you're seeing them. And you assume that, and you get into a lot of heartache because of it. So I assume that, oh, of course, if I communicate my boundaries, you gonna get it. Like, it's not gonna be a fight. Forgetting that people see things through a different lens and perspective. Not to say the way they're seeing it is wrong, it's just different because we're all different people. And one thing we're not in control of is how people will react to our boundaries. So don't try and control that. It doesn't end well. Please learn from me. You will feel some guilt as well while enforcing your boundaries, but guilt doesn't mean stop. And setting a boundary is basically requesting or demanding that people treat you the way you want to be treated. And that is your right as a human. But the thing is, it's also their right to say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks to that boundary. So you can't control that. All you can control is your space within that boundary. I've spoken for so long. I really hope all of this helps you. I really hope this is a year that you're courageous enough to start working on getting to being your best self, closer to your highest you. I hope this is a year you start building intentional communities around you. So people who are really your safe places, you start to reevaluate all the people around you. I hope this is a year that you change your financial habits for the health year. Please let us know if you want this 52-week challenge worksheet. And I hope this is the year you actually start setting the boundaries. It would be so good to, when we're doing the 2024 episode at the end of the year, reflect. You know, it'd be nice to hear from you to see what was your experience like actively healing you this year. That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.